Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna share my screen. I get a meld of the interpretation.
Engaged. Yeah.
Adding our Spanish language interpretation. Melda, you should have that now. Can everyone see tonight's schedule? Can folks see that? Coming in?
Yes.
Great. Okay. And Imelda, would you want to jump in and mention the interpretation services on this channel? Or Gabby or Stephanie, if you can. Okay, I'm gonna advance some slides. For those who speak Spanish.
This is Gabriela, Gabby. Para esos que quieren la interpretación de español, aquí están las instrucciones. Es a la izquierda, a la derecha de Zoom.
Great, thanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here. We're really, really excited to have you. Thanks for being part of, a great event on an important issue that so many of us are really passionate about. And we had so many wonderful people put today's event together, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a bit. Here's our schedule for tonight. My name is Alex Shore. I'm the Executive Director of Catalyze SV, and delighted to be with all my fellow community members. Thank you to all the city officials who are here today. Thank you as well to Eric Schoenauer, the representative of the developer of the flea market and the owner of the flea market. Eric, feel free to wave your hand if you'd like, but we're grateful that you're here with our community today. And thank you everyone else who was able to join. So just wanted to let you know a little bit about Catalyze SV. We are a nonprofit group. We are funded by the community, foundations, and you can see some of our other funders, and we're all about creating sustainable, equitable, and vibrant places for people, which is why we're here today, thinking about how can we envision the next generation of the flea market to develop it without displacing any folks here in our community. We want to thank all our co-sponsors for helping put together today's event, for promoting it. Special thank you to the Berryessa Flea Market Vendors Association for putting together some of the content that we're here today, and all the other organizations that have lent a hand to get the word out. So a special thanks Urban Habitat, Human Agenda, Latino Business Foundation, LUNA, which stands for Latinos Unidos por una Nueva America, Transform, Working Partnerships USA, and LCSV, the Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley. Thank you all, fellow organizations, for supporting today's event. A couple housekeeping events. Hopefully, if you prefer to speak in Spanish today, you saw that there's an option in interpretation, that button, and Imelda Bautista is providing interpretation for us tonight. Thank you, Imelda. Want to thank Roberto, representative from the flea market vendors. You'll be hearing from him in a minute. Thank you, Roberto, for supporting this event. And a really special thanks to our volunteers, Gabriela, Stephanie, Diego, and Chris, for planning tonight. They remind me of John Lewis's Walking with the Wind, leaders who are leading us as a community forward, and we're walking with the wind that they're pushing our change and new ideas and creativity forward. I also want to thank Catalyze SV's communications and community engagement specialist, our own Summer Manga. She's helping man the Facebook Live chat tonight if anything comes in through there. So thanks, Summer. Feel free to wave if you'd like. And yeah, we will be putting this up on YouTube, on our Catalyze SV's YouTube page, and sharing it out with folks in the coming days. And it's already on Facebook Live right now. So a couple of ground rules for today. We've got an amazing crowd. Thank you all so much for being here. We would ask you to stay muted through today's discussion. We're going to hear from a lot of good perspectives. We won't have too much time, unfortunately, for questions and conversation, but you're welcome at any time in the next hour and a half to put all that in the chat function of Zoom. We have a lot of co-hosts who are helping respond to questions and comments, so they'll be chiming in as well. And we want to keep tonight's discussion focused on the development of the flea market. If there are other topics that come up that aren't related to this one, community benefits agreements, or development of private land, public markets, any of the related topics around the flea market, we'll probably reroute those topics. But you're welcome to bring up things in the Zoom chat function, and we can continue to have conversations about other things that way. So why did Catalyze SV get engaged in this issue, in the development of the flea market? Well, as you saw in our mission statement, we care about sustainable, equitable, and vibrant places for people. We want the next generation of what's built at this site to be really incredible. We think there's an opportunity for some form or fashion for the flea market to be there. As a white guy raised in some privilege, this is not a place that I went to as a kid personally, but I was taught the value of caring about your friends, your neighbors, and places that lift people up and provide them a way of life and a living. And I've been incredibly influenced by my friends and our community members, our neighbors, who care so much about this place. And it's so important to our city that it's great that we're shining a spotlight on it. So thank you, all of our members and community advocates who have been pushing on the flea market and getting Catalyze SV knowledgeable and passionate about this issue. We're just so delighted to be alongside you, and thank you for teaching us and for making us a part of this discussion. So we are very lucky to have a couple MCs who will be taking us forward through the rest, most of the rest of the event. And those are two Catalyze SV volunteers, Stephanie and Gabby. They're going to introduce themselves, MC us throughout the rest of the night, and help share with you our first perspectives on why the flea market is important to them. Thank you, Gabby and Stephanie, for being here.
Oh, Gabby, I think you're on mute.
Oops, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby Vasquez. I'm a volunteer here at Catalyze SV. I sit on the community engagement and project advocacy committees. Like many people, my family was priced out of the Valley and had the Silicon Valley moved to the Central Valley. And Catalyze SV gave me an opportunity to have direct impact on developments here and express my voice and my concerns. Yeah, I'm really excited. Today happened because Diego and I thought that this topic, many of the larger community wasn't aware of the development happening, the second phase of this development at the flea market. I know most people should know about, the BART development that took over 10 years, I believe. Yeah, so we're excited to teach you a little bit more about what's going on. Stephanie?
Thank you so much, Gabby. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Valenzuela. I'm a part of the newly Community Engagement Committee for Catalyze SV. I'm really excited to be here. I'm also a board member for LCSV, Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley. I'm also a commissioner for the Commission on the Status of Women. And most importantly, I am a San Jose native who is also passionate, very much passionate about improving the Valley's housing crisis through advocacy. So, and like many others in our community, the flea market has been an integral part of my life and me and my family's life. So I'm excited to be here. So I'd like to start off by introducing the Berryessa Flea Market Vendors Association President, Roberto Gonzalez. You may have seen the petition to save the Berryessa Flea Market, which garnered over 5,000 signatures of support from the community, which is amazing. Roberto, could you tell us a little bit more about your story and why you decided to organize and start the association?
Yes, definitely. Thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. And just to give you guys a little bit background on me and my parents. So my dad and my uncles started working at the market when they first got to San Jose from Mexico back in 1991. After a bit of time, my dad was able to establish a small business there. And as a child growing up, I would really look forward to the summers where I would spend all my time there. Helping my parents at the stand, but in reality, I'd go and play with my little cousins and go to the arcades and, just mess around and have fun. But as I did grow older, it became my first job. I became more focused with the business, and I learned and developed valuable skills that even to this day, I still use. And hopefully, one day when I have my future children, I'll be able to share those experiences with them, as well as, bet a lot of you guys have shared experiences there at the market that, you guys would love to pass down to other folks or just continue that tradition on. And the thought of the market and vendors being displaced is an injustice that we cannot stand for. And that is why we started the Vendor Association. To voice our concerns over the displacement of the market, as there is no mention of incorporating the market to the development plans, and we have not received any assurances of what our future will be. We hope that tonight's conversation sparked the landowners and the city to include the market and the vendors in the future plans, and not just give us empty promises. We would like to now share testimonies from more members and we would like now to share testimonies from our members on what the market means to them, as well as the impact that it'll have on their lives. If we could go to the video now, guys.
Summer, you're on mute. I think you might have to take yourself off mute to share. If you could start the video again when you're ready.
I think Catalyze SV, the community and key experts for coming to this event and bringing awareness to the key issue that we've been facing for many years as vendors. Can we develop without displacing the vendors and small businesses? I've worked at the flea market. I grew up at a market my entire life. In Mexico, my whole family has their own business at a market. When I came here, I saw the flea market and it made me feel like home. Like when you the flea market, you can go with your family, and when you work there, you become a family. The flea market gave so many opportunities to me, to other small businesses, to many other families, sending kids to college, sending them to follow their dreams. A flea market gives the American dream that many come here and fight for. When I was 17, I decided that I wanted to do my own business, that I wanted to provide for my family and give them a better future. And that's the opportunity that the flea market has gave to thousands and thousands of families. If the flea market is displaced, the opportunity, that dream, that goal of being your entrepreneur and the what ifs of what could happen if you are your own boss will be taken away. The opportunities of parents providing for their kids so they could pay for college, be a lawyer, be a doctor, is going to be all taken away, and without us even being included or heard on our concerns.
Tengo en este flea market 35 años, de aquí mantuve a mi familia, de aquí compré lo que tengo y de aquí he vivido y esta ha sido mi vida y duele lo que quieren hacer con nosotros. La flea market hace 30 años, la pulga si la llegan a cerrar sería un impacto muy grande para mí porque a esta edad ya no encontraría trabajo como cualquier joven. Yo quisiera que la pulga nos tomara en cuenta en una decisión que ellos tomen para bienestar de todos, no nada más para ellos, que nos apoyen a nosotros.
Mi esposa, formamos este negocio hace 4 años. La pulga nos dio la oportunidad de poner el puesto. De esto nos mantenemos a mis hijos, a mi familia. Yo no sé por qué la quieren cerrar, pero lo único que sé es que se van a perder muchos trabajos. Pedimos, por favor, su apoyo, porque pónganse a pensar en los niños de 15 años, 12 años que están estudiando, que van a la universidad, que dependen de aquí. ¿A dónde van y que necesitamos este trabajo? Gracias y los esperamos aquí.
Hola, mi nombre es Lidia Landa. Yo vendo en la pulga de San José. Soy madre soltera de 2 hijos. De ahí dependo para sostener a mis hijos. Me gustaría que nos dieran alguna opción para no cerrar o nos ayudaran, porque de ahí dependemos muchas familias, no tan solo yo, sino muchas familias, y nos gustaría que nos pudieran ayudar.
Ok, hola, buenas tardes, mi nombre es Nicolás, y nomás para hacerles saber que pues yo aquí tengo en el flea market trabajando cerca de 25 años, y pues de aquí, ¿sabes? Este es mi trabajo que hasta ahorita lo tengo todavía, y aquí es el que mandaron a todos mis hijos a la escuela. Tengo 2 que uno se acaba de graduar de UCLA, el otro se va a graduar en USA Santa Cruz también. Y pues hacerles saber que pues si cierran esto, nos va a perjudicar a mucha gente. Quisiéramos que no la cerraran, porque si no, ¿a dónde nos vamos a ir? Este es el sustento para muchos, para mí y para mucha gente de los que estamos trabajando aquí. Entonces sí, quisiera hacerles saber o hacerles, pues que se den cuenta que si cierran esto, van a afectar a mucha gente.
And just wanted to thank everyone again for joining us tonight and letting us share our concerns of all the vendors. We are not disposable items. They don't have to destroy our source of income and put our livelihoods at risk to provide new homes and outside businesses. We urge the community, the city officials, and landowners to work with us to find solutions of development without displacement. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roberto. I personally grew up going to the Capitol Flea Market, and although Latinos are the majority in these markets, there is also, many Vietnamese community, Middle Eastern community, and South Asian community. And my favorite thing is just watching people interact and find a place of belonging here at our markets. Now I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, Kurt Wheeler. Kurt Wheeler is a part of an organization named Project for Public Spaces, a New York-based organization that focuses on strengthening communities through public spaces. Last year, PPS launched Market Cities Initiative with the goal to expand the understanding that and the impact that public markets bring to communities that they serve, and to promote supportive policies and investments in market infrastructure. Kurt, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do?
Okay, there's the unmute button. I think we're all having some issues today. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm kind of new to actually using Zoom to present. But yeah, I'd love to share a little bit more about Project for Public Spaces and what we do. Thanks so much for including me in this panel. I'm really happy to be here to talk about the value public markets bring to communities and the many reasons they are worth supporting. I'm the program manager of public markets at Project for Public Spaces. And as was just mentioned, we're a global nonprofit planning and design firm based out of New York City. We work on all different kinds of public spaces. And since 1987, we have worked throughout North America on more than 70 public market projects, including market relocations, as well as developing new markets. And just to clarify, when we say public market, we're talking about everything from indoor market buildings to open air farmers markets to flea and craft markets. So ultimately, a public market should be for the community and by the community. In terms of our public market work, we work on individual market projects, as I mentioned. We offer trainings on how to create successful markets, as well as organizing the International Public Markets Conference. And then through outside funding, we conduct research on public market related issues. And I'm sure everyone here today, because most of you, or there are many people here passionate about markets, can think back to a time when you traveled to another place, maybe another country, and you visited one of their markets. You maybe felt like you were finally experiencing the real culture of that place. Or maybe you regularly visit your local farmer's market, your flea market for fresh produce, or to run into a neighbor. So public markets are special for all of those reasons, but they, through years of research and on the ground engagement, we know that along with that kind of warm and fuzzy feeling, they actually have real community benefits, everything from providing economic opportunity, renewing downtowns and neighborhoods, bringing people together, creating active public space, linking rural and urban economies, and promoting public health. So we don't have time for me to give examples of all of these benefits, but I do want to share a few that might be more pertinent to the Berryessa market and its current context. So our research with the Ford Foundation back in the early 2000s showed that an overwhelming majority of vendors we interviewed in the US were able to self-finance their vending businesses because startup costs are so low. So markets are a low risk and low investment opportunity to start a business, which is especially important for women and new immigrants. Vending at the market can also present a great way to supplement income. So it can be a way to test out a business on the side until there's proof of concept. So while we're talking about economic opportunity, I want to share a little case study and a sort of cautionary tale of the Els Encants flea market in Barcelona. This is one of Europe's oldest markets dating back to the 14th century. It obviously looked a little different then than it does today. Its new home as of 2013 is a huge iconic new building, which includes over 300 stalls and 9 eateries, and it provides protection from the elements with this really striking mirrored roof you can see in this picture. It's located in the Glorious neighborhood, and vendors sell everything from antiques, trinkets, art books, and other flea market items. So what's interesting about Barcelona is that all of the city's 40 plus markets are municipally run, and the city has poured tons of investment into renovating their markets since the 1990s. The city sees markets as a key driver for economic growth and job creation in each of their districts. So the location of the market has changed many times since the 14th century, but for the 80 years before it moved to its new site, it was relatively informal, largely self-contained and operated in the open air on an open lot in the same neighborhood. It was loosely regulated, involved very limited physical infrastructure, and it featured hundreds of vendors as well as day traders, many of whom were undocumented. The market was vulnerable to the elements, but it was a really exciting and vibrant place for visitors. In short, it was a really great community gathering space and a reflection of the neighborhood as home to predominantly lower income residents seeking jobs and economic opportunity, as well as for residents seeking affordable goods. The future of the market became uncertain from the late 90s to the early 2000s due to development pressures. So relocation of the market was on the table, but it would have likely involved a major downsizing of vending space and no assurances of success in a new neighborhood location. So in the late aughts, the city of Barcelona began a master planning process to revitalize the neighborhood. And after much deliberation and talks with the community and negotiating with the Elden Cons Vendors Association, the city approved a new design for the site within the same neighborhood, the Glorious neighborhood, not far from its previous site. So the city ultimately recognized the market's value to the city and residents within the district and decided to make it a core element of their revitalization planning. So the new market has largely been seen as a major success in terms of visitorship. It continues to feature many legacy vendors as well as new vendors. But I do want to highlight that the new facility and major city investment has led to the market being much more regulated by management. So this has led many of the informal vendors from the previous location to be unable to access vending stalls inside the market. So many of these vendors who are undocumented have taken to selling on the street illegally outside of the market to sell their wares, creating a sort of web of street markets as you near the market facility. And this actually really adds to like a lively atmosphere of the district, which I think is a positive, but the surrounding upgrades to the neighborhood as part of the master plan and revitalization, which are in large part a result of the success of the market in the first place, have led to the area being more heavily policed, making illegal street vending a vulnerable option for many folks just trying to make a living. So in terms of local governments interested in supporting job creation via markets and trying to upgrade or professionalize a market or even moving it to a new space, these are just some potential unintended consequences to be aware of.
Do you want to go full screen on this so people can just see a little bit closer on things?
Oh, is it not full screen? Oh, I'm so sorry. Let's see.
I really want to go into your Asana tab. No, just kidding.
Oh no. Is it okay? I don't know if it might take me too long to kind of finagle. Okay. Is this okay? My apologies, everyone.
Try double clicking.
Double clicking? No.
Kurt, if you just click on the 3 dots next to update, go ahead and click on that. The 3 dot next to update on the top right part, top right, next to update.
Right, top right.
Go click on that. Yep, click on that and just click on, do you see 100% on the right next to that on the right? No, yep, perfect. Click on that.
Cool. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I remember now. I recall why I didn't have this before. I have my notes up that I'm looking at as a pop-up that I can't see now. Sorry. Let's see if I can.
Whatever works for you.
Just press ESC. Just press ESC. Just press exit.
Okay. Now where did they go? Let me out of here. Okay.
Or you can have us.
Now I'm frozen. Oops.
Present.
Let's see. Let me try to reshare my screen and see if that just like restarts it.
And we can also share your screen if you'd like.
Okay, I'm going to. I don't know what's happening here, but yeah, if you want to open that slide.
Yeah, Summer, do you mind? Sorry, Kurt, to interrupt your flow. Just
that's okay.
Wanted to put the full image, the full focus on your images and words.
Was this the slide you were on, Kurt?
No, go a couple of ahead, I think. Oh, you're going the wrong way.
Sorry about that.
There, I think I wrapped up what I was saying. Let's see. Okay. All right, so yeah, I guess the main point is that this is a bit of a cautionary tale in terms of the level of investment, even when a city comes in to support a market. It's a delicate ecosystem, and relocating a market, moving it to a new location can really impact informal vending dynamics. So something to keep in mind. Next slide. So going back to that kind of wheel of community benefits I showed earlier, markets renew downtowns and neighborhoods. So this is one of the most common reasons folks start new markets. People want to increase foot traffic in an area or district, and markets are really effective at doing this. So this is a picture of Union Square Green Market in New York City. The market opened with only a handful of vendors back in the late 70s, and it's grown to host more than 85 regular vendors 4 days a week year round. The market is seen as one of the main factors in what turned Union Square and the surrounding neighborhood around back in the 80s. It used to be a not so safe area. And one of the reasons it became the restaurant and shopping mecca it is today. During the 2008 recession, New York saw a 10% commercial vacancy rate citywide and only 4% around Union Square. So there's been a lot of commercial investment with Whole Foods and Trader Joe's coming in just a block away. So it's a really kind of mutually beneficial dynamic they have going. Next slide. So markets bring together diverse people. Next slide. So this is data from going back to that Ford Foundation research we did in the 2000s. One of the questions asked on the customer survey was, why do you go to your local market? And the most common response was, it brings people together. So in addition to offering local products that are often more affordable than other options available, markets are important places for social mixing. And that's one of the main reasons people keep coming back to their markets. Next slide. And then this is kind of the last benefit I want to highlight from that wheel. Markets create active public space, which is often lacking in areas, especially underserved areas. So back in 2009, to activate the infrastructure of an underutilized transit stop in East Austin, Texas, a group decided to begin a pop-up market called Hope Farmers Market. They feature locally produced food and other locally produced products every Sunday. And they use this underutilized gazebo in the back there for live music and educational programming. They use the space as a meeting point for community groups and community organizing. It's been a really successful, flexible, and adaptable way to create much needed gathering space in this community. And it gives folks from all over the city a reason to visit the neighborhood. And next slide. That's it. There is my contact information if you want to reach out. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you, Kurt, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Kurt will be back with us during the ending segment of the QA and panel discussion. Steph?
Thank you so much, Gabby. And thank you again, Kurt, for all of your wisdom. I'd now like to introduce our nationally recognized community benefits agreement attorney and public land expert, Julian Gross. Julian has facilitated dozens of development agreements throughout the United States and an impactful leader in our community. He's provided legal representation of community coalitions and successful negotiation of over 20 community benefits agreement, including the 2018 Facebook CBA, which provided tens of millions of dollars for affordable housing in the region. Thank you so much, Julian.
Hi, can you guys see me? I think we still have the slide up, so just want to make sure the camera's working for everybody else.
Yes, we can see you.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to Catalyze and to everybody for putting together this great event and letting us who aren't down there hear more about the very striking situation with regard to the vendors and the market down there. The video was great, so I was glad to hear the voices of the people impacted if the development goes forward. So thanks for putting all that together and for the presentation also, Kurt, about the markets. As Stephanie said, I'm Julian Gross. I'm an attorney who's worked on community benefits agreements and related efforts for quite some time now. So I thought I've got a lot of stuff I would like to cover in 10 minutes. I'm going to hold myself to 10 minutes and stop at 20 after, no matter what I don't have to say, and we'll hit it during the Q&A, I guess, if that's okay. I want to sort of zoom us out from the particulars of the Berryessa market and markets in general, in particular, to community benefits agreements negotiations, generally, and generally how communities engage in large-scale land use questions and try to influence the decisions for the benefit of the community and the affected people regarding these large projects. So let's start with the definition of a CBA. Your classic community benefits agreement is a legally binding agreement negotiated between affected community stakeholders and a private developer of a large urban land use development project. So there's exceptions to all those things. Sometimes a public entity will negotiate a CBA itself. But usually what we're talking about with the CBA is the actually affected stakeholders, perhaps a coalition of them in a neighborhood, getting together, and instead of sort of merely advocating with the city or the public entity that is moving the project forward, going directly to the developer and negotiating a legally binding contract that describes the community benefits that will be delivered if the project goes forward. So those could be benefits like affordable housing, living wages, local hiring. It often goes forward with commitments about labor relations at the job site or on the construction site or in operations. So those are the things that the developer will say in a CBA, we will do this if our project goes forward. And what the community-based organizations and stakeholders deliver in exchange is generally support for the project through the public consideration process, for the approval hearings in front of the city or the county. Sometimes at stake is legal claims, like a claims release. We're not going to sue to stop the project if we get a certain level of community benefits. But the projects I've worked on generally involve a coalition of community-based organizations, and very frequently a labor community coalition, which is, you know, the strongest type of coalition politically, and multiple issues with regard to a project. I also want to be sure that we don't lose track of things beyond that sort of classic, almost narrow definition of a CBA, and talk more generally about how community benefits are negotiated by public entities with regard to these projects. How are affected stakeholders and residents, like the vendors at the market, listened to? Is the only way they're listened to that they have an ability to show up like any other member of the public at a public hearing and say that, you know, they're going to be affected and they don't want this to happen? Or how are there ways that affected individuals and businesses and other local entities can really help shape the project? And then crucially, maybe just because I'm a lawyer, I focus on this end, but it was mentioned in the chat, I believe, making sure that promises that are made at the front end when a project is being developed and approved are actually made in writing in a legally enforceable way. That's the big thing. It's very easy for all these projects in urban areas. They're always sold as developing job opportunities, developing business opportunities, and everyone else who's involved with these projects, whether it's the city or the developer or other affected parties who are more sophisticated and better funded, they all have lawyers and they get the things that they want out of the project in writing in a contract that can be enforced. That's how these things work. And I think the big transformation over the last 20, 25 years in this area of land use development and community benefits is making some strides toward getting commitments related to the community benefits I described to be treated as important and as enforceable and as appropriate for legally binding agreements and actual legal commitments as all the rest of the project. These aren't add-ons, these aren't side pieces. These are actually the things that the proponents of a project, whether it's the city proponents or a private developer who's a proponent, these are the things that they say the project is going to deliver. So if those things are treated as so important that they're the top headline when a project is being described to the public or advocated for in front of the public, but not important enough to be part of a contract written with specificity that can be enforced by someone who cares about it and is supposed to benefit from it, that tells you how real those commitments are. So I'm not saying it's never a real commitment, but the question of whether it's real is it a legally binding commitment and is it specific? So I went off on a little side tangent there, but I guess I would say that over the past 20 years or so, the development of tools like CBAs to capture those commitments in a legally binding way and to get affected individuals and community members and organizations a literal seat at the table when negotiating the aspects of the project that they care about. That has really transformed discussions of these large projects, at least in urban areas in blue states, I would say. We're not really having these conversations very much in large swaths of the country, unfortunately, but more and more so every year. There's more CBA efforts going on in the South, for example. There was a very strong CBA negotiated in Nashville, Tennessee about 2 years ago. I'm getting calls from Charlotte, from Ohio, those other places. So it sort of started in California and germinated there, and the tools were developed there with the leadership of groups like Working Partnerships, which was sort of early on this, and a network of groups working in this issue, in this area, I should say. And like many things, sort of is spreading and has spread from California to other parts of the country. So I talked a little about what can go into CBA. So there's affirmative benefits like wage commitments, affordable housing commitments, and so forth. And then there's also, there are also can be mitigations from affected parties. So I worked on an agreement in LA where unfortunately there were a lot of low-income tenants who were going to be displaced by a project, and we negotiated enhanced relocation benefits. So that was an example where they didn't love the project, but if the project was going to go forward, they needed a certain amount of compensation that was more than the legal minimum that the developer was going to have to provide in order to address the effect on the severe effect on their lives of having to move, many elderly disabled people. So who can negotiate a CBA? Displaced parties can negotiate it, coalitions, as I mentioned. There are several good local examples, but I think I'm going to skip to some of the interesting questions about leverage, which is how community representatives end up at the table for a CBA. Sometimes it is legal leverage, right? Sometimes there is a legal claim that could be brought that would either stop the project or delay the project to the degree that a threat that you're going to bring that claim can provide leverage to get the project to offer some benefits in a legally binding way. That is not the main way that CBAs that I've worked on have been generated. It's mostly been through the political process where you, as an affected party, are making your case the old-fashioned way. Number one, actually numbers 1, 2, and 3 on this is organizing. Straight up community organizing, knocking doors, having credibility, involving the affected people, and showing up at public hearings. Electeds care about that, as they should. Lobbying is very important. You're probably going to need some legal support and some research support if you're actually in negotiations. You need to be able to get your case out in the media. And then I would say that it is important not just to be saying, we don't like the project, this is bad. I guess there are some circumstances where that really is all you can say, and you just have to make the case that it's a bad project that shouldn't occur. But sometimes either because the project has a lot of potential for jobs and benefits in a neighborhood and so forth, or you feel like the project is going to go forward and it's a question of damage control, you need to be crafting your ask, right? You need to be crafting something that if it's not a solution, it's at least a proposed agreement, right? Step one is making the case of why the issues you care about are important. Step two, or step 1B is going to be, you have to say what you actually want. And if you want to get traction on it and actually get into negotiation of an agreement, it needs to be something remotely plausible. So that's what, a strategic thing, but it involves research and it involves a little more capacity needed to get to the table and negotiate something with another party. I would note that many times projects just have a huge amount of momentum and they're sort of political steamrollers. That doesn't mean you should give up. I think there are a lot of times where elected officials, at the end of the day may feel like this project's really important. We know we're going to vote for it. That doesn't mean they can be of no use in trying to craft a project that addresses a range of community needs. They oftentimes just want to do that. Sometimes they just want to avoid a hard vote. But in either case, they still can be crucial in shaping a project that they're excited about voting for, right? That they're excited about moving forward without a bunch of credible stakeholders saying it's going to devastate them and their lives, and there hasn't been enough attention paid to their needs, right? So you can still make the case, and you might sometimes need only one champion on a city council. I know I'm at time, so please remind me in the Q&A to talk about, if people don't know about, the Flower Mart development or the Flea in San Francisco, where there was a large flower mart in the south of market area of San Francisco, one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. Developer wanted to build an office there, and there were negotiations around that, extensive negotiations and years of work to get a relocated flower mart in place. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap up. The last point I would make is, if there are legal objections from either the city or the developer to the concept that something like this could be negotiated, those are, in my opinion, almost always overblown. And there's always a way. There's always a way to figure it out. It might not be your first choice. It might not even be your second choice, but there's always a way to figure out how to land these issues in a fair, appropriate, empathetic way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Julian. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Alex.
There's always a way. Thanks, Julian. I love that spirit of collaboration, creativity, and innovation. And we have to be a little innovative tonight. And we have a really good problem, which is one of our speakers got a little bit temporarily, we hope, sick because he got a shot in the arm today. And so maybe more of us will be experiencing this in the weeks ahead, I hope, where we may not be able to speak at all the things we were expected to speak at because we're protecting the planet and ourselves. So we had a little bit of a switch here on the last minute, but we've still got some great content to come from some experts. We're going to pivot a little bit and bifurcate this time, and we're going to hear first from James Chang, who is the Chief of Staff for Councilmember Ben Bartlett, who couldn't be here today because he's getting the vaccine. And then we're going to hear from another expert who has worked on community benefits agreements. Most recently, some of you have probably seen about the Google development in downtown San Jose. And one of the folks who's focused a lot on it and is very well aware of it is Jeffrey Buchanan with Working Partnerships USA. So we're going to go to James Chang first to talk a little bit about his bosses and his experience up in Berkeley. And then we're going to talk a little bit with Jeffrey about his experience with the Downtown West Development Agreement and what he's learned and what that could teach us and potentially inform us with the flea market. So thanks, James, for jumping in, and Jeff as well. We really appreciate the help on the last minute.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. My name is James Chang. I am the Chief of Staff to Berkeley City Council Member Ben Bartlett. Councilmember Bartlett apologizes for not attending today. He sends his sincerest apologies, and I will be delivering remarks on his behalf. We want to start by thanking the San Jose flea market community and the activists for inviting our office to speak about our experiences with our South Berkeley flea market in regards to our upcoming Ashby-BART development, and also along with our Adeline Corridor plan, both of which are plans that plans on developing the space that is currently the South Berkeley Flea Market at the Ashby-BART station. And we are proud of Berkeley's work to make sure that the Berkeley community and cultural heritage are preserved, while also embracing our responsibility to make up for more than a decade of underproduction of housing in California. And there is no escaping our responsibility. But it must not come at the expense of ordinary people from feeding their families. That is a false choice. The pandemic has exacerbated our wealth and racial inequality, and the recovery is actually being characterized as a K-shaped recovery, with one side going up and one side going down, and one side gaining steam and one side being hampered and becoming more impoverished. And we have to bend the arc of recovery so it works for everyone. So here, we have a flea market that is providing income and stability for the workers and the small businesses. And at the same time, in California, in the Bay Area, in this housing crisis, we have much needed housing production. The choice between fulfilling our housing, economic development, and economic justice requirements is a false choice. The two must work hand in hand. And democracy works best when it provides universal outcomes. And by the way, this is what democracy looks like. One of South Berkeley's biggest success in including our flea market in the Ashby BART and North Berkeley BART development plan, and also in our Adeline Corridor plan, is actually similar from what we're seeing today, which is the persistent constructive organizing, deep engagement. So when we did our MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding with BART, they understand the importance of community buy-in. And I really do want to actually highlight our Berkeley's Office of Economic Development, because they and their staff members were the ones that actually really showed up and did the deep community engagement and the deep listening. So when we were actually signing the MOU, moving forward with the process, when we reached out to the flea market through our Office of Economic Development, there were no opposition to our plans, because they understood and welcomed the much needed economic development and new housing. And it was through this process and through the framing of always yes and yes, we were able to ensure the process of building and the building prosperity is inclusive. So, our country, our state is at a pivotal moment. It could be ruptured, it could be healed at this time. And the only way we can heal is if we unify and make the economy work for everyone. We must reject the politics of scarcity. It is not one or the other. We can continue to help our flea market small business owners and their workers' ability to earn a living and feed their families, and fulfill our duty for much needed housing production. We can have both. Unifying the two is the only way to achieve sustainability in our communities. Thank you. And I send it back to you, Alex.
Okay, I'll just send it right over to Jeff, if that's okay, Stephanie and Gabby.
Okay. All right, I'll set my timer so I don't go over. I'm a talker. Glad to be here. So Jeffrey Buchanan, the policy director of our Working Partnerships. Back in 2014, Working Partnerships in our South Bay Labor Council, a number of our community and labor partners formed a campaign, Silicon Valley Rising, coming out of the Great Recession, just seeing here in the South Bay that, while tech companies were becoming, fabulously wealthy, that we were seeing, low-income service workers, communities of color that weren't participating in all this income generation, all this wealth that was being built. At the same time, you had service workers in the tech industry, and this continues on to many extents, living in garages, sleeping on couches, not able to make ends meet, even for those who work for some of the most fabulously wealthy companies on the globe. And so through Silicon Valley Rising, we've begun to organize service sector service workers in the tech industry. I think to date we have about 8,000 union members since 2014 who've been able to come together, join a union, negotiate for better wages and healthcare. But then also on top of being able to ensure that we give these workers a voice and power to be able to organize for getting better wages and working conditions for their families, to be able to work collectively with our community partners on how the tech industry's growth is creating problems for so many, particularly in communities of color, around the issues of housing justice and the rising rent increases that we're seeing as the tech industry grows and brings more high income individuals here and puts more pressure on our housing market. And so, we've been able to work with a lot of folks that are here on these calls on issues of tenant rights in the city of San Jose. And then more recently, through this campaign around Google and its particular campus plans at Downtown West. In 2017, the city and Google first announced that they wanted to come together to, Google wanted to buy some public land and they wanted to build an enormous campus in the middle of downtown San Jose. They made these announcements without really engaging anybody in the community. Community groups, labor groups, everyone was kind of caught off guard by the whole situation. We hosted there's many organizations that were part of this, and some were on the call today, a series of town halls to try to get a sense of like what the community wanted to see from this project. We connected with people like Julian to be able to do some public education about what community benefits look like and to kind of start to get people thinking about all the concerns about occupational segregation in the tech industry, of people of color not being able to get access to high wage jobs, and for those low wage jobs without commitments on job quality and a pathway to a union, that they weren't going to be in family supporting jobs, and the concerns about the potential displacement in the project. Those were the top concerns that we heard from engaging with thousands of residents in the city. And then from that, built out a community labor coalition and campaign plan to really drive for what kind of community benefits can we get from this development to be able to address these top concerns. There was kind of twists and turns along the way. We wanted to at first to negotiate a private agreement between our community coalition and Google. Google was not willing to do that at first. The city was also had its questions. We were able, I think, to do through the community organizing and through the research and the media work to really, beat the drum on this idea of community benefits and to educate the public about all of the kinds of public goods that are being, given to Google to be able to build out this kind of development. And so things like height increases, reduced parking requirements, other financially valuable land use changes that were going to be a part of the development agreement that they sought. Those all have a financial value to landholders. And so council, by making those decisions, was going to be, taking public goods, giving them to a private developer. And so this process of trying to assess community benefits for the community to be able to capture some of the value in the decisions our city council is being asked to make. Over time, we were able to build political support amongst the city council that while we couldn't necessarily get to a private negotiation with Google for a kind of traditional collective or a community benefits agreement, that we would essentially create a process where there would be a community benefits plan embedded into the development agreement. And from that point, we continued our community organizing, we continued engaging with Google, engaging with the city of San Jose, to a point where in recent months, gotten to a point where we were able to enter into a deep negotiating process about what the best kind of community governance would look like for a community benefits plan attached to that in addressing these top concerns around displacement and economic opportunity, and how the community leaders in the communities that are facing displacement, not just in the Dearden area, but really across the city that are most impacted, where we could have individuals with both lived experience and professional experience working in neighborhoods that are experiencing displacement in San Jose, be the decision makers around how these dollars are used to address displacement through both, residential stabilization and through some of these economic opportunity pathways. And so that's through I wish I had longer than 5 minutes, but we were able to kind of build public support for here's this value that is being bestowed on Google as a developer. Let's come up with a public policy to be able to capture that value, to be able to assess what that value is, to have the city negotiate with Google on what that value was, and then work with the community on really developing what the framework on how to use those dollars. I think it's something that's very transferable if the stakeholders are most impacted think it's a viable solution to this project in the flea market. To look at things like what's the value of adding all of that additional office capacity to the project? What's the financial value of reducing parking requirements? What's the financial value of some of the other beneficial planning changes that are being requested by the developer? And we've already seen in financial analysis from the city that projects like this have additional feasibility to carry fees greater than what they're seeing today. And we know that this project, because it's right on top of BART, is going to be able to charge top dollar to likely another tech industry giant moving into that big office project. And so they're going to be able to charge top dollar for this development because of the billions of dollars in taxpayer funded infrastructure that backs right up to their property. And so there is financial viability to look at negotiating community benefits. We know that there's a number of requests around upzoning that are being requested from the developer. And so I think there's really opportunity here to consider, is that one piece of the larger solution? Obviously, within these community benefits plans, things like land dedication are possible. Like for instance, in the Google project, there is a community fund for part of it, but then part of the community benefits plan involves land dedication. So you could start to see a pathway where, perhaps community benefits could generate some land dedication on the site for a future marketplace, possibly some dollars to be able to build whatever infrastructure is needed for that market, or to be able to purchase land elsewhere. Obviously, the vendors and others who are directly impacted are going to know what the solutions that meet their needs look like. But just thinking about the policy construct about dollars and political leverage and this development, at the end of the day, the development's going to need 6 votes from the city council to approve it. And so are there the ability to get members on the city council supportive, like they have been through the Google project around creating a framework for the negotiation of community benefits? Can that be transferred onto this project is a question that's worth for those who are close to the campaign considering.
Wow, thank you so much, Jeff. You hit so many important points. So thank you for providing us with so much information. Luckily, so we'll be able to, I know you mentioned only 5 minutes, but coincidentally, we'll actually now move into the panelist discussion and Q&A. So I'd love to invite Kurt, Julian, and Jeff and James back into the conversation. So I had my first question, and if you all are ready, this question is for Julian. And that is if you could please expand on the Flower Mart development and the work that's been done so far, that would be great.
Sure thing. I can tell you a little about it anyway, but I was not too involved with that. So basically, the Flower Mart was a huge full block wide area south of Market, where all these different small businesses, south of Market in San Francisco, where all these different small businesses were there to sell flowers, essentially, or different kinds of plants. And it was all set up beautifully for them. People would come from all over the city. It was open at set hours, and it was really coveted slots in the market for that. So it was a real institution, and in some ways analogous to the Berryessa market in that there were just huge numbers of small businesses in there, mostly run by people of color. And so, from a raw sort of economic perspective, if you were a planner at the highest levels of government or university, you might say that's not the highest and best use of that land, some of the most expensive real estate in the country. So obviously there was a lot of development pressure like there is in San Francisco. And there's an office project that bought the land, wanted to move in there. And that's all great from the macro perspective, I guess, but for the businesses, obviously, it was a huge issue. And They were lucky enough, I was going to say, to get sort of one champion is all it took on the Board of Supervisors. So Supervisor Aaron Peskin from the City and County Board of Supervisors just said, we've got to treat the vendors properly, or I'm not going to be okay with this. And he brokered meetings, and he was just really hammering the home for all his colleagues on the board the importance of taking care of these businesses and not just going ahead with office development like all over the rest of downtown San Francisco and leaving these businesses to fend for themselves. And the first offers, of course, were, you know, very inadequate, right? It was X dollars for relocation when, you know, that doesn't really do much for you if you don't know if you can have a business located somewhere else. So if all these businesses were dispersed, they wouldn't get the foot traffic of people coming to check at all the businesses, right? So what they really, the vendors really needed was another place where they all could relocate that was reasonable for access, wasn't too far geographically, and would have reasonable rents. So a big ask when you're moving from downtown San Francisco. But over years, they formed a legal entity. I think that was my narrow role, and this was helping form the legal entity for them to advocate for themselves and negotiate agreements around this. And then with the leadership, the traction they got with one council member, one Board of Supervisors member, they were able eventually to cut a decent relocation deal to move the Flower Mart in whole to somewhere else.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian. I have a question for Kurt. Kurt, during my research, I found that in 2017, the mayor of London also launched a major policy initiative to support and promote the city's 280 markets, which is crazy, 280 markets. Can you talk a little bit about why the city decided to invest in the markets as a critical infrastructure, and perhaps if you know any challenges in fully engaging at a grassroots level?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And actually our last International Public Markets Conference was in London in 2019. So the mayor of London was our partner there. And essentially in London, they've created a markets board for the same reasons that I mentioned that Barcelona has invested a ton of money in their market system. They see the markets as being a really fantastic way of developing or creating economic development mechanisms and supporting job creation in different districts throughout the city. So the London Markets Board is a really inclusive, diverse group of stakeholders involved in markets. I think a ton of vendors are on the board. So they're the people working in the markets making a lot of the recommendations for how to improve or renovate existing markets, the needs they have, the infrastructure they require in order to operate. A big issue with markets is management capacity. And so I think they have training programs for market managers. It's a really, I'd say that London and Barcelona are kind of the top, they're kind of the cream of the crop in terms of supporting markets at a kind of systems level. Yeah, I don't know if the person who asked that has follow-up questions, but happy to talk more about it.
Yeah. Did you want to just touch upon the public markets initiative? I know it was, I might be wrong, it launched right before COVID.
Yeah, so the market, we started a new initiative at Project for Public Spaces called the Market Cities Initiative. And that's, it was formed so in addition to doing kind of our public market services like education, outreach, direct client work, we decided that it made sense for us to start looking at market systems more holistically in cities, that kind of one-off markets are great, but it actually makes it a lot easier to advocate for markets and the needs they have if you're collecting data on a city or town regional scale. So yeah, we just kicked it off in 2019 and have worked with 3 different cities. And actually in Seattle, Seattle was one of our cities, and they were able to get, they advocated to have a position created at the city level to advocate for markets, kind of navigate or be a liaison between the farmers markets and other city agencies, and they had that approved. So it's kind of an exciting outcome of our work initially.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Kurt, for joining us. This was all super invaluable information. I love all the work that you do and all the work that PPS does.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
If anyone from the audience had any questions for any of the speakers, and if not, I will turn it over to, oh, we have one question. Alex?
Yes. Oh, is it me? Sorry. I don't know. I had my hand up yet. Yes. Okay. Hi. I just wanted to ask the lawyer Julian to speak about the San Francisco market thing that he told us to remind him that he didn't get to finish. That's all.
Oh, sorry, turning my camera on. Sorry, that was actually the flower mart thing that I was just talking about in response to the last question. That was, so it's not a flea market, but it was you know, sales of flowers and related plants by individual vendors. So it was kind of similar in that regard.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other questions? We have a question from Brenda. It says, I have a question. What is the advice you would give to this group to get a fair deal? One thing, not a bargain on.
I feel like it would be presumptuous of me to feel like I could weigh in at all on what the substance of an agreement looks like for you that would be fair for you all, you know, not having worked with you and not knowing the project that well. I would just encourage you to try to find that balance of ambitious and also realistic, you know, with your best assessment of the situation, but get specific with what you want and ask for things, put it out as a proposal, put it out as a platform, start just making your case to everyone who will listen, whether it's papers, whether it's electeds. This may be all the stuff you're doing already. I mean, I'm a lawyer, not a campaign organizer. But just don't settle until you know, have something that you really think is fair, and be sure that you're, you know, getting, you know, just do everything you can to get traction with your arguments in every case. And you know, in most I don't know about your situation, but in most places in the Bay Area, if you do a sustained effort like that and just keep making your case, you'll get something better than you would have if you hadn't put that effort in. So it may not be perfect, but you know, you can definitely get something.
Thank you, Julian. And Kurt, would you like to answer the question about the multi-level markets?
Sorry, I guess I wonder what specifically you're curious about when it comes to multi-level markets.
Well, I think we as meaning the community members here in the Silicon Valley don't know about multi-level markets, and we also here, like our organization Catalyze SV, we advocate for density. So if you can just talk a little bit about.
Well, I guess in terms of like a typology of markets, that's not really a distinction we make per se, but in terms of multi-level markets being different than other types of markets and how they operate. I will say that example I gave of the market in Barcelona, the Els Encants flea market, that is multi-level. And before it moved into that space, it was on a vacant lot. So it was out in the open. And I know that when the vendors, when the city was negotiating the deal with the Vendors Association to see what made most sense for them, I know the vendors were pushing back quite a bit about the multi-level aspect of it. They were concerned about how that would impact the folks on the lower level versus the upper level, and how market management would handle those two levels. So I know that if you have multi-levels management of the space, depending on your specific situation can be more complicated. You might need a second pair of hands on one level or the other, but I think overall, the layout of that space has worked really well for the vendors who are able to operate inside the market. I mean, I think that's probably, I think Essex Market in New York is another example of a multi-level market, and they do have different managers on each level. So it's a public space that needs to be managed. So if you add additional tiers, that's probably the biggest consideration.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again, Kurt. We had one last question from Jessica Hitchcock asking, this question is for James Chang. Based on on your work in Berkeley, what can the city of San Jose do to help the vendors of the Flea?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, to start, I don't live in San Jose. I don't work in San Jose city government. So, I can't give you an exact answer, but I can definitely share with you my experience working with the city of Berkeley. And I really highlighted our Office of Economic Development because I would say they are our front lines to making sure that all of our businesses that need help get the adequate help that they need to not just survive, but to thrive. And they also work with business districts to make sure that their business districts are constantly looking at different models of policies to make sure that their businesses continue to thrive as well. In the city of Berkeley, what I've always experienced is there's two parts, right? There's the fact that you operate a business in Berkeley and possibly you live in Berkeley. So if you happen, and I'm using Berkeley because once again, it is not my jurisdiction to talk about San Jose, but if you are a business owner in Berkeley, you should reach out to the business owner that represents that district. I mean, your business that lives within that district. But if you also live in Berkeley, then you should also get involved with your council member that you also happen to live in the district in. And that way you are able to get both your council members representing two of your, identities, and also vested interest to support you. And what I would also always recommend is, to Berkeley, to folks, to businesses in Berkeley, is to always actively engage with the staff when you're engaging with the council members. So that way there's a symbiotic relationship because your council members are there to advocate for you, but really it's the Berkeley staff that does the heavy lifting and all the work, and it is through that communication that is most helpful.
That's perfect. So driving final touches is reach out to the business owners, get involved, and actively engage with the staff of the council members. So thank you. Like to pass it over back to Alex to wrap things up.
And actually, not just staff of the council member, like actual city staff. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to James and Jeffrey for subbing in, for Kurt and Julian for joining us in our community to talk about this all. Thanks, Gabby and Stephanie. Great job shepherding the conversation through. And it's not going to be a meeting about a development as important as this one without a call to action. So for those of you new advocates, that's what we're asking you to do today to continue to drive a conversation about this. So the biggest next point in the public decision will be on May 12th. The Planning Commission is expected to vote on the flea market, and there's two aspects of that. So we've highlighted the webpage there on February 12th on the city's website, and that tiny URL will take you right to it. So feel free to go to that. You can also, in addition, Summer, if you can jump to the next slide. You can also take a look at our action alert from last month. The Planning Commission took this up in March, and there was such concern and consternation that the Planning Commission actually delayed their discussion and vote until May 12th. There were so many great community members who came out and made a case for things like the flea market and density on the site that I think the Planning Commission wanted to see more community engagement and conversation. So we're going to have another action alert out May 3rd, the week of May 3rd. So keep an eye out for that. Check out our action alert through that tiny URL. You can start talking to your city officials right now if you'd like. And we have a way to email them all very quickly in 15 seconds. Next slide. You can also, and so what is Catalyze SV asked for this for this site? It's not just continuing the legacy of the flea market through potentially relocating it or reimagining it. It's also higher density. There are height limits on this site that the city doesn't need to put in place. And the more height limits they put, the less likely we are to get the number of homes that we want. And in a lot of developments, in a lot of cities, the higher up a developer goes, the more money they can make from heights, and thus the more benefits we can have as a community down on the ground level with things like markets, public space, retail, etc. So not only does high heights allow for more homes and more tax revenue for the city if it's an office, especially if it's an office, but also with property taxes, but more homes and more height actually helps provide some of the community benefits we want to see. So that's really important component that we ask all of you to weigh in on as well. And the developers also proposed, if you look at estimates from groups like Transform and Spur on how much it costs to build a parking space, they've potentially are going to spend $700 to $800 million just to build parking in this development on the flea market. And right next to a BART station and VTA's transit center with bus service, it just doesn't seem like the best use of our resources, whether it's at the developers, VTAs, the cities, etc. We want developments that are planning for 20 years from now, not 20 years in the past. And we've got to transfer how we get around to other different types of ways. There's no better site for density and transit-oriented development in maybe the entire South Bay right now than the Berryessa flea market. So keep those points in mind. As always, we encourage you to share whatever your view is. And if you want to hear ours, here's what we would say. Next slide. There's another viewpoint you may want to hone in on and support, and that's the Berryessa Flea Market Vendors Association. We talked earlier about the petition they put out with about 5,000 signatures, an incredible amount of community support in basically a week. And that's such a testament to the passion and the feeling that so many people have about this important place. So if you want to support their petition, you can do that as well. Next slide. So if you want to just get involved in Catalyze SV's work generally, we do things like community engagement, we advocate for projects, we host educational events like this. So we have committees that meet generally once a month, and you can plug into those committees and get involved. We have a committee meeting in an hour that starts. So we'll be seeing a couple of you probably then. And if you just want to see what we're up to and see if our work is of interest to you, just join that newsletter link at the bottom. And of course, we're also on social media. On the next slide, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And maybe your interest of all of this is to talk to the experts you heard from tonight. And we're very grateful that they've willing to share their contact information. If James or Jeffrey wants to as well, they can put it in the chat function. Thank you, Kurt and Julian, for sharing your expertise tonight and potentially going forward. Roberto, who you heard his personal story as a vendor earlier in the evening, that's the email address for the Vendors Association if you want to talk to them directly. And if you want to talk with us, you can drop us an email at advocacy@catalyzesv.org. Jeffrey is putting his contact information in the chat function, so feel free to check that out, Jeffrey at wapusa.org. And anyway, we're so grateful for all of you. It's a big issue. We also want to thank all the city staff who came out today. We know that they're thinking about these issues and trying to find solutions that work for as many of us as possible. We hope we've shared some of those solutions today. So anything you all can do to put in the hands of decision makers like the Planning Commission, the City Council, the developers' representatives about your ideas or the ideas we've been sharing tonight will really, really help. So we hope you'll do that. Again, thank you to Eric Schoenauer, representative from the Bum family, who's talking about redeveloping the site, for being here to listen. And we thank all of you for your interest in this issue. And again, my most special thanks to Gabby, Stephanie, Chris, and Diego. You led us into this discussion, and we're so grateful for it. We hope we can do you proud, and let's all keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.